Hello, everyone. Today I'm with Roula-Maria Dib. So, welcome, Rula.
Hi, John. Thank you so much for hosting me on your wonderful platform. Very happy and honored to be here.
Rula, we actually talked a long time ago, but it was before the date when I migrated into video, uh, podcasts. But that was a little bit about how you stumbled across Jung. But today, I think we're going
Uh-huh.
to, which is still on my Substack as an audio file, but
hmm
today we're going to talk about arts-based research and, as I understand, and disciplinarity. And I just wondered
hmm
how did you get into arts-based research? Why are you so passionate about it? What is it? Let's start from there.
Right. Thank you so much, John, for the question. Well, first of all, what got me into it? I did stumble across Jung, and I also stumbled across the term arts-based research because, as it turns out, this is something that I've always been doing. What makes me passionate about it is my love for the arts in general and specifically poetry because this is my field. And I find it in its own nature very transdisciplinary. So just like all arts-based research, we're talking about transdisciplinarity, which is different than multidisciplinarity, by the way, and interdisciplinarity in a sense that transdisciplinarity isn't just about mixing disciplines or putting them together. It's what it's really about is moving beyond them. It means looking at the spaces in between where you've got, for example, literature, psychology, spirituality, and science. That's the space where they all meet. And allowing those intersections to generate new ways of knowing. And from a Jungian perspective, we would see that transdisciplinarity is more about integration rather than fragmentation. Just as individuation, for example, seeks to unite opposites in the psyche, transdisciplinary work also seeks to bring together different fields of knowledge, but not by collapsing them into one, but by letting each illuminate the others. If you want, we could say they're all illuminating each other. And it's eros in action because you've got connection across boundaries. We also like to think of it, maybe Jung would have thought of it that way as a kind of alchemy. So when psychology speaks to poetry, when science listens to myth, when art converses with philosophy, something new is born. And it's not about staying in one silo, in one category, but it's about honoring the creative sparks that happen when disciplines sort of cross-pollinate. And if you look historically, if you look at the alchemists, they were all poets or musicians, or they knew a little bit about everything. There was a little bit of math, a little bit of science, a little bit of visual art, so in their works. So yeah,
Yeah, no,
alchemy
that's
as
good.
metaphor and
Mm. Working with the material. I always think about hands when I think about alchemy, like getting your hands in the material,
yeah.
which
Yes.
is beautiful because I don't know. I think Jung said something like one day that the journey from the head to the heart is not very far in distance, but it can take about 30 years or something. So there's this journey from
Uh-huh.
our intellect or whatever, our head into the body, and
Mm-hmm.
alchemy makes you think of working with everything.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, your hands are definitely in it. You're doing something. There's always this primary tincture, as Yeats would have called it. The material, whether it is a musical note, whether it is a pigment, if you're a painter, whether it is finding the right word, but you are in a way using your hands, whether literally or proverbially, but there is a lot of work. I like to compare it with cooking actually. So you
Right. Yeah.
actually have the idea and then you cook and then you consume. And it's a very transdisciplinary experience because you're actually using all your five senses during that experience, which started in the mind, manifested into the world, and it's actually become embodied as it is consumed by you.
Do you stick to the recipe when you cook, or do you like to go a little bit ad?
Never, never,
So what's that
never.
all
You just
about, though?
trust the
Because that,
process.
yeah, that's a good point, though, isn't it? So,
Yeah.
so let's, just going back a fraction, Ruler. Like, obviously you're an academic and come from the scholarly pursuit. So why do we need to, uh, why do we need to think about this? Is it that
About
specialization is
transdisciplinarity.
is still a bit of a thing? Um,
Hmm. Specialization as in, you mean credentiality or like
uh,
being an expert in one
being an
certain
expert
field?
in one specific area, um,
Mm-hmm.
is what I was mostly thinking of there. It's like
Yeah.
what's not good enough about that anymore? Like if I was just, 17, 16, 17, and thinking about going to university, I'd probably be thinking, oh, become a specialist in one specific area
Yeah.
and that'll be good. That'll
Yeah.
make a lot of money. So what's wrong with it?
It's very limiting. And we could often fall into the problem of suppressing our own creativity in the process. So yeah, I mean, do by all means specialize in one area, but let that be a door that opens to other areas as well. Um, and again, that's what arts-based research shows us because transdisciplinarity is about practice. It's not just about theory, it's not just about what you know, it's about letting what you know become the springboard for many other things. And again, as we said earlier, it's also about integration. So it's a very unifying thing to explore and experiment different areas. We do have a lot of specialists at LABRC who come and present their work, and it's mainly because of this thirst for connection and also for seeing different aspects of their own psyche being connected. For example, we have medical practitioners, surgeons, scientists, archaeologists, lawyers. So we have people from many different areas, and the majority, by the way, are actually from the hard sciences fields. Um, but they feel that exploring the world poetically, artistically, performatively, it actually enhances not just what they know, but how they relate what they know and what they do to others. So, not to say it simplifies the education process, but it makes it more accessible, it makes it more enjoyable, and it makes it more wholesome.
Oh,
So, yes,
comes to mind.
you could have a specialty, but yeah.
Whole seems to be. I mean, didn't Jung say, or maybe he was quoting someone else, that art takes the whole, requires the whole man or whole woman? It's
Hmm.
kind of like, um, it's almost like creativity takes all of us in a way. Like someone could know about a field and be a specialist, but creativity just takes everything you've got in one way, doesn't it? Like to write a poem.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And if we want to see it from a Jungian perspective, we see that our specializations are a kind of persona. It's how we present our legitimacy, if you want, or label ourselves professionally to the world. That's very necessary, but that's not the whole story. And what makes Jung and today Jungian arts-based research really powerful is the encounter with the unconscious, the encounter with symbol, with creativity. And that's something that you can't really put a stamp on professionally. You can't really credential your imagination, to put it that way. So yeah, we do need both. And oftentimes it's the creative side that gets repressed But once we open up, we use our own specialty as a springboard for other ways of creativity and knowing and practice. Um, we have two, then we have the grounding of training and the freedom to let the work be led by the psyche itself.
But that's a bit of a paradox, isn't it? What you just said
It
there. You know, to
can
be,
be.
what did you
Again, the
say?
tension of opposites.
Well, it's kind of like to be led by the training, but then to open. I mean, I agree with it
Yeah.
totally, but it's kind of like it's a tricky business in one way, isn't it?
Yeah. It's tricky, but it's partly innate in us all. It's a very, very natural process. It's just that we never sit with it. We never give it the time. We never give it the trust that it deserves. And I think we can all work towards that, first of all, by setting an intention, and secondly, by simply letting it be. It's very easy to get stuck to the routine of our work or what we do for a living or um, the hierarchy of the sciences over the arts. But we kind of need to let go a little bit of that.
So tell us about
It's we
when you write a poem. How does it work for you
Mhm.
these days? Like, because you must be busy and poetry and busyness, do they go together? Like, how does it work?
Yeah. Yeah, I always tell people poetry is my state of mind. So it's always there. It's a way of seeing the world. And to actually put pen to paper and write a poem with one nice chunk of time, let's say an hour or two, it doesn't happen that way. It cannot happen that way, at least not in my own lifestyle, unless I'm on vacation or I'm able to afford the time to actually just sit there with a poem. But there are so many ways to let it happen. Um, if you've heard about the way Jane Austen writes, that's pretty much similar to what I do. So Jane
So
Austen
tell
would
us.
do housework and busy around a lot of
Oh, okay.
things, but she had a little notebook and it was put somewhere in the corner of the
Mm.
house. And she would, every time she'd get an idea, she would just jot it down in that notebook. I'm pretty much the same. Um, the ideas, the thoughts, they sometimes come to you. You don't actually sit there and ask for them and beg them to come and tell
No,
you something. Sometimes they just pop up. Sometimes it comes in the form of engaging with an image or thinking of a solution or an encounter with someone or a strong emotion. There are many different natural prompts to this poetic state of mind. And when they happen, you need to grab them before they run away.
yeah. You need to wait.
So,
So
yeah.
if your daughter or your husband talk to you at that time, do you tell them to bugger off, so to speak? And because, this is just coming at the
I
time.
often don't need to because they know me in that state. So when they see me writing something down, they usually just back off. But yeah, I mean, sometimes if I feel like I need to work on editing a poem,
Mm,
yeah, that's time that you really need to allot for yourself. And I use the 20-minute rule.
right.
So I want to work on it for at least 20 minutes, and everybody can do 20 minutes. Everybody can. So if you can take a shower in 10 minutes, you can edit a poem or at least start editing it in 20 minutes. So give yourself small chunks of time, be realistic. And then if you feel that you can do more, that's great. If you don't, then it won't make you feel so bad. But yeah, 20 minutes a day, that works for me. That's my apple a day creatively.
Would it be right to say you kind of create a little bit in the right brain? The reverie, everything we were
Yes.
told was so inferior in one way, the letting go, the reverie, the dreamy. But do you edit in the
Uh-huh.
kind of left brain? Is create in the right brain, edit in the left brain?
Well, when it comes to structure, when there are certain specific rules that I need to work on, so for example, you need to lessen the word count here, you need to break the stanza at a certain point, you need to check how the flow of ideas will be received by the readers. Yeah, that's a little bit of the left brain part. Um, but no, I mean, I'm very intuitive when it comes to so many things, and especially poetry. Um, so no, the majority, I would say, of even the editing itself comes from the right brain. Which reminds me of McGilchrist over here, left brain,
Yeah.
right brain.
Mm,
So he says we need both, and of course I totally agree.
mm,
Um, but again, he insists that the right hemisphere needs to be the master again.
mm.
So when working with any poem or any creative work, again, that's the right hemisphere that is the master.
But that is the revolution at the moment, it seems to me, is like it's not possible. Oh, I mean, I know this is a bit of a statement, maybe a bit of an oversimplification, but it's kind of not possible to be left brain in the world anymore. Like you need that kind of right brain to be able to steer or navigate through the world and make context through the world, isn't it?
Absolutely, because again, there are multiple ways of knowing, and we have them all. And many of them, they all require training. Okay, but the right hemisphere is the more intuitive one, the more grasping form. Um, and I would dare say the more instinctual form as well. So there are so many things that we do just because we know how without being taught, without being trained. There are so many things that are built in. And we come to realize that at some point. Being left brain, it does require training. It does require a lot of being in touch with your rational side, the know-how of technicalities and little details and things, which of course is very necessary. Um, but no matter how much you suppress the right brain, it will come back to you in certain ways. And it's better to give it leeway and give it space than to keep it suppressed and sitting in the corner.
Absolutely. What's
Because
it
again,
like?
it's making the unconscious conscious when you do that. That's what creativity is. And Jung said, if you don't make the unconscious conscious, then it will take control of your life and you will call it fate.
It comes up and grabs you from behind. But can we go into it a bit more? What does it mean? I've heard that so many times, and it just seems it's one of those things you go, yeah, that's true, but it's kind of to make the unconscious conscious. How do we do that? Or what, I mean, what is it?
Work with the images. The unconscious speaks to us in images. I mean, there are, of course, other ways, but that's why, for example, I like ekphrastic poetry and I like dream poetry. And I like taking pictures of things that I see and that kind of hit or strike a certain chord in me. I work with those images. They make me see things. And there's a lot of active imagination, of course, involved in the process. So let's take dreams, for example, because dreams speak to us these are actually pieces of the unconscious, which is why we cannot rationalize what they mean.
Yeah.
But if we sit with them, if we engage with them creatively, then we're actually sitting with the unconscious in that little dark space that is
Mm,
unknown, that is uncertain, and that is trying to say something to us.
mm.
And we're bringing it out into consciousness by drawing it into a painting or sculpting it out or dancing it or singing it or writing it out as a poem.
I think the part that really gets me about that is that the dreams bring your own metaphors. Like, for example, if I was starting to write and I could think, oh, it'd be good to copy Jane Austen or something, or someone's style. And there's a place for all of that. There's a place for copying someone's style for a beginning. I'm not saying there isn't, but somehow the unconscious will bring you the material if you're prepared to notice
Hmm.
it, which is your material, your peculiar material.
Yeah, it's your material, but it's also sometimes very archetypal. So it's a piece of the larger collective unconscious. as well.
So what
So
can you
it's
say a
mine
bit
in a
more about
sense
it?
that I dreamt it,
Yeah.
but it's also everybody else's because it's highly archetypal.
So it relates. Have you found that, well, I'm sure you have, but that if you come from a deep place in the sense of creating from a metaphor, an image or something, that other
Hmm.
that other people often relate to that. I mean, that's what happens, isn't it? Someone recognizes some deeper pattern maybe as well, an
Hmm.
archetypal pattern or something.
They recognize it. It doesn't mean it rings the same in everybody, especially when we're dealing with symbols, because symbols resist this um, notion of having a fixed meaning, which is what makes them also very highly archetypal. They could mean different things to different people,
Yeah.
but the energy is there. So,
Yeah.
for example, a poem could trigger the image of a trickster. It could remind somebody of a betrayal. At the same time, it could, um, there are different betrayal stories that people have shared. So sometimes it's a friend, other times it's a lover, sometimes it's an institution. But the energy is there. The personal stories vary, but where it takes you, or actually where it stems from, is one place. And sometimes when it's just a symbol, for example, a symbol of a rose, which is considered as a universal symbol.
Yeah.
Again,
I
it
mean,
it can transcend this fixed meaning. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to mean love or
no.
sensuality or whatever. It could mean
It,
something else for somebody else who's had a personal experience where a rose was present at a certain time. It could remind this person of somebody else.
yeah, could be a negative
Hmm.
association, to use a bit of jargon or something,
Yes.
in a way. And a
Yeah,
snake,
absolutely.
a snake can mean a
The snake.
multitude of things to many different people. It can be a bad
Yeah.
symbol or a good symbol.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I remember when I was around 12 or 13 years old. I was obsessed with dreams since a very young age. And I got this book, a dream interpretation book. But what it actually does, it doesn't interpret your dreams. So as a kid, I found that very disappointing. So I wanted, for example, this book to tell me
So,
what a snake means, but it
yeah,
doesn't. It tells me what different cultures see it as and what different analysts see it as well. So, and it's sometimes it's really striking the difference. Because in one culture, it could mean you have an enemy. In another culture, it means someone is dying. And somewhere else, it could mean something really good is about to happen to you. It's a premonition. So it's very diverse. Interpretations vary. Again, it's the unconscious. This is an area of uncertainty. It speaks to us in symbols and images which resist fixed meaning. And again, what we can do is to creatively approach them. There's nobody and nothing that you can consult that would give you the
the
meaning
the
of what you
the
saw in a dream.
meaning. So it's very kind of uncult-like in a way, that way, isn't it? Um, but
Yes.
it's has a little bit of trepidation because
Mm-hmm.
to stay with the new, it's almost like a bit of an addiction to say, okay, a snake, like in the image behind, the snake reminds me a little of the caduceus, which is a healing image, but in
Mm-hmm.
Christianity, the snake might have been the tempter or what
Yeah.
so it's kind of like, but then to stay with it seems that's what requires the whole man or woman sort of thing. It's kind of like it takes a lot of you to
Mm-hmm.
stay with an image, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah. To stay with it, listen to it, and actually have a conversation. Speak back. So when it speaks to you, you speak back. You keep ping-ponging the conversation back and forth.
Do you find that easy?
And it's not easy, but it's fun. The hardest part, I would say, is to actually start it. But once you start the conversation, you could keep going on and on. So what we do in our workshops, for example, when we engage with these kinds of images, is we give it, again, we give it the 20-minute rule. And then oftentimes the 20 minutes are over and um, people tell me, you know what, could I have an extra 5 minutes? Could we have an extra 10 minutes? Could I finish this after the workshop is over? Of course you can. So the hardest part is starting. And we know it could take much, much longer. But once you're
Why do you
there,
have that rule anyway? I mean, why do you have a 20-minute rule? Just so that people don't keep it too open-ended or something, is that it?
first of all, not to intimidate them too much, because if you tell them you have an hour, then yeah, you would sit and worry about what am I going to write about in an hour? I just saw a goddamn snake in my dream. What am I going to say to it? Besides, why are you here? So that's one thing. And then another thing, the Pomodoro method, which is 20 minutes, you could actually squeeze out some great ideas in 20-minute intervals. So 20 minutes, speak about it for, let's say, 10, and then take another 20 minutes, which will be another fresh start for you, and also at the same time, a continuation.
And what do people say when they get involved in processes like
Oh,
this? I mean,
they
you
they
already
love
said.
it actually. They love it, and it surprises them every single time. The image at the end surprises them with something. Um, maybe answers that they've been looking for, maybe specific connections that they weren't seeing, but every single time there is something to take home with you after writing the poem or after this little act of imagination. So it's
So
very refreshing.
going back to the beginning, you know, academia, scholarly work, that's quite different.
Yeah.
Some something there is quite different, isn't it? What's so different? And also one other question just for you personally, if you know, rationality and intuition might sometimes be seen on opposite end. What's it like being an intuitive person in academia or scholarly pursuit? And then secondly, how is it different, this
Well,
work?
the scene has been changing recently. And again, it also depends on the field. So, for example, if you are in a purely, so let's say I work at a literature department at a university, which is literature, different types of theories, different types of approaches. Um, but there's lots and lots of focus on the critical aspect of things. What does the author mean? What is the author trying to say? Let's take it, let's say, for example, from a Marxist perspective. How would that apply? Let's take it from a Jungian perspective. But it's like, yeah, you have a point. You need to prove it. That's not bad. That's what critique is all about. But then again, if you have a feeling that the author is trying to take us somewhere or say something, well, you can't really prove it, you're in trouble. You can't just say, Yeats was acting prophetic in his 1919. Well, what do you mean? How can you prove the prophetic voice? Okay, there are certain ways, but you can only do as much in order to show that. But let's say you are in, so my Jungian homies, for example, are very different. We have lots of space for intuitive thinking. We have lots of space for intuitive work itself. And in creative practice, which is starting to be integrated into scholarly uh, parts of institutions and the world in general. Yeah, there is a lot of space for that now. So, for example, we are starting to see a more creative theses, creative masters and PhD theses that stem from trauma, that stem from life experience, that stem from research in getting data and interviewing other people with certain experiences and stuff. Um, and then including your feelings there, because that's what arts-based research does. It connects people. It allows people to see that dimension that the overly critical format of writing, of scholarly writing, hides away.
Yeah.
So, yeah, creativity. We need to integrate that into the scholarly world in
Yes,
order
and
to allow for more intuitive thinking.
I remember
It's there even in the sciences.
yeah, it is. And
Yeah.
I mean, earlier when you were talking, I was thinking of Eros and how James Hillman was so influenced by Albert Portman, who was a biologist, and there was that
Hmm.
was interdisciplinary, or trans,
Yeah.
sorry. It's kind of like they were. I mean, Hillman was very influenced by that biology of Portman, not his field,
Hmm.
you know, but it struck his
Hmm.
imagination and somehow sparked him off or whatever. So
Right.
I think that relates to what you were talking about in terms of how.
It's also Jung because Jung was a psychiatrist by practice, so very rational, very scientific, medical. And again, he was Jung, the Jung that we know. Um, and at the root of his psychology, transdisciplinarity was there, and it was powered by Eros and the desire for connection, the desire for union, for integration, wholesomeness. It's not just intellectual, it's also relational, it's also embodied. It's soulful, it's intuitive, and it's all about letting the imagination, intuition, and creativity sit at the same table with rationality and logic. And this is what he did. Freud didn't do. And it was, of course, something sneezed at the very beginning. Right now, we're seeing more space for Jung, more space for post-Jungianism, working with Jungian theories, art-based research, all that.
Hmm. I remember Marion Woodman was saying in one of her books that when she was young and she did a painting and she made I mean, I've mentioned this somewhere else before, but she did the
Hmm.
sky like green and she did it all back to front. The sky was green and the earth was blue and da da da. And her teacher
Hmm.
told her off, and she couldn't paint for a long time. But and then I remember, I can't remember, I don't know how you say this word, but in the Scandinavian countries, the aurora borealis or whatever,
Hmm.
and
Yes.
I saw the sky was totally green, in at some time of the year. So it's like it's not as if she was actually wrong, but it was
Hmm.
her imagination that needed to be perhaps encouraged in any case.
Yeah, of course. The imaginal, not just
Mm.
the imagination, but the imaginal as a realm. So, yeah, the sky is green in the imaginal realm.
Mm.
Again, different levels of reality. In this dimension, the sky is blue. It can be cloudy, it can be gray. It's, well, if you have the aurora borealis, then yes, it can be green. But again, it doesn't really matter, even if we didn't have that, even if it was never green in this
Yeah.
reality or in this so-called dimension. Yeah, it exists. So every idea in the imagination, everything you could think of exists in a parallel universe in the imaginal realm. So an art is a medium, is an outlet that lets you practice that.
Mm.
It is, you are creating. So you are bringing something from the imaginal realm into this one. You're doing it through art. And you're not doing it to mean anything. You're not doing that to create something that's already there. On the contrary, you're adding another layer to what we see and feel and hear.
Mm. William Blake was interesting because he
Yeah.
was one of those, it seems to me like one of those people that it was just so spontaneous, the visions, eruptions, the creativity, and
Hmm.
very, what's the word? Original.
You mean
Well, original
in,
in the sense of peculiar.
yeah,
If I think of William Blake, I think of someone who had their own peculiar vision of the world, very peculiar in a way,
yeah,
but beautiful
uh-huh,
at the same time.
yeah. It is, and it's also when you speak about Blake and not just the poetry but the paintings of Blake, I also automatically think of Gibran Khalil Gibran, who who adapted the same style in his own, and he called it the ethereal art. So it's kind of a way of materially grasping that realm, the realm of spirit, the realm of meaning, and trying to embody it. So whether it's Blake or Gibran, there's a lot of personification. It's mainly concepts, it's mainly allegory. There are colors, but very limited colors. They have this very airy quality to them, if you want. So it's very original to Blake, yes. But at the same time, I find it as sprouting out of um, this desire to actually portray what the spirit looks like, what our concepts look like. Um, Maybe not as much as validating it to the world, but kind of giving it shape and form.
mm,
So, okay, so this is what poverty looks like.
mm,
This is what love looks like.
mm. Personifying, as you're saying,
Hmm.
bringing
Hmm.
form to those deep, well, you could say archetypal things, something. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with abstract,
mm,
but what they were trying to do is to concretize.
mm,
And again, it's also important because it's one form of representation.
mm,
And although it's more straightforward than abstract, if you see the quality of Blake's paintings, there's a lot of symbolism in it. There's
mm,
a lot less verisimilitude than symbolism, than blurred borders.
mm. And Rula, what about trauma and creativity?
Hmm.
Because it seems like uh, I don't know. It seems to me in general that the response to the world
Hmm.
in the present environment is somehow needs to be creative, and
Yes.
also within our um, uh, the trauma that we have experienced along the way. That creativity is some kind of
Hmm.
healing agent to that. But how? How are they connected?
Well, it's complicated because it can be healing, but it doesn't have to be. As Susan Rowland says, it's not, so Jungian arts-based research is not therapy, but it is therapeutic. And I think that's due to so many factors because with trauma, see, this is the area when words fail. And trauma, it often overwhelms language. It's not something that can always be neatly narrated, if ever. And then you have these arts-based approaches, like, for example, drawing and poetry and performance and music. They give form to these unspeakable feelings, meanings, narrations, and they allow expression beyond discursive language. Trauma also, one big thing about trauma is that it is stored in the body. So if have you you're probably familiar with the book The Body Keeps the Score
I am.
by Bessel van der Kolk, yeah.
Yeah, not in detail, but
So
yes.
we know that trauma is it's stored in the body, and arts-based research also works somatically. It invites gesture, it invites movement, sound, image, and we're not only talking about the performative arts, we're also talking about arts, literary arts such as poetry and writing. Every creative act is a physical act, by the way. You need to use your hands, as you said. So
Mm,
that's the least that you do, but you're using your hands. Your hands might be trembling. Your hands might carry other feelings in them, but it is a bodily experience. You're not just sitting there thinking about what happened to you. You are bringing it out into being. So yeah, that's creativity works thematically. And also making the unconscious conscious, as we said before. So there's a lot of unconscious content that can remain trapped for years, sometimes forever. But as Jung saw, the imagination could be a bridge between the unconscious and consciousness. And then creative practice could maybe reweave, if for lack of a better term, but reweave the fractured inner worlds, um, giving trauma narrative some symbolic containers, which are maybe a bit, they feel safer, with the language of archetypes, images, and myths. Um,
Container
yeah,
seems
I
like
mean,
a
I could go on and on.
well, that's all right. Meaning it's good to go on. It's I don't know. I've had the experience. I think, I can talk about writing a little bit in the sense though there's something. Uh, I mean, I remember I wrote a book when I was about 28 or so, and it just came out over 5 or 6 months, and it was a
Hmm.
beautiful experience. It's like it just came out so beautifully. And then there's something very intoxicating about that, and maybe a little bit inflating about creativity. But then
Hmm.
later I've had an experience of sometimes if the shadow or a complex comes out,
Uh-huh.
that can be quite
Right.
scary.
It's frightening, very
It's
frightening.
it's frightening. See, there's this thing of what is it? I mean, I'm just using jargon, I suppose, but there's our persona, isn't there? And there's our who we are in the world, and that, and then if there's that powerful shadow material
Hmm.
is kind of wanting to express itself, that becomes a bit of a dilemma.
Yes.
Um, so this thing of a container somehow seems important. So could you
Yeah.
speak a bit more about that?
Right. So I'm going to bring the trickster in here a little bit because what the shadow does, yeah, sometimes it does leak during the creative process. And that, as you said, that can be very frightening. But what it actually does is it grips you.
Mm,
That's the part that grips you, that pins you down. Trauma itself is a very unsuccessful encounter with the shadow. It locks us into rigidity, into hypervigilance, numbness, fear, all that. No, what creativity can do, and because we're dealing with such dark, unconscious material with trauma, creativity is reintroducing play over here. You're not, I mean, you are creating, you are playing. At the end of the day, creativity is a form of play. It's a form of experimenting with your own shadow. And it also contains the element of surprise. So that's the jack in the box where, the trickster's medicine, if you want to call it. That's where you can actually loosen trauma's grip and open pathways for transformation. But again, when the jack in the box surprises you, that can be scary, that can be startling.
mm.
But again, you need to work with it.
Do you see that
Um,
in events in programs?
yes,
Yes.
yes, yeah, oh yeah, we see
So
that so
someone is a
much.
bit uh, the strength of the material is surprising for someone, perhaps. Could we say that?
Yes. Yeah, and we see that mainly with the visual material. I mean, that's been my experience so far. But the visual material, um, and again, I think it's because it's always easier for people to process the visual than the verbal. So it hits differently. And we don't only see it in the artist, of course, we see it in the audience who come along carrying their own traumas as well. But it's a very powerful site of individuation. It's a very powerful site of, again, bringing out what is unconscious into the conscious world. And
Mm,
I think it's because creativity gives trauma, gives not necessarily the shadow itself, but it gives trauma its own language, one that is sensory, symbolic, relational. So it's a bit more concrete. You're able to see it, you're able to feel it.
mm,
And there's something in that
mm.
that eventually makes it less scary.
Yeah. I remember.
Yeah, and also the collective. the collective as well.
With
So
Trump.
being in a community, sharing it in a safe space, that's also part of the container. The creative container is not just the creation itself, but it's also this sphere of who you share it with. And it's very powerful and it's very healing.
I remember James Hillman, it's actually my favourite essay of all time, Peaks and Vales,
Hmm.
or it meant a lot to me. When you read something at a time in your life and wow, that means a lot to me about the spirit
Hmm.
and the soul. And he began that essay, and originally he said, this essay or whatever is written with some hatred because hatred is separating. I'm separating
Hmm.
the soul and the spirit or whatever. And
Uh-huh.
very surprising for someone in psychology, I found, to say that. But it it's also working with that. He worked with um, that feeling of separation between the two, and maybe that's why it became such a wonderful essay.
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, that's the whole thing. This is the space that really needs to be worked with, the space of separation, the space of siloing. And then again, if you're working towards integration and towards wholeness, that's where you need to start from. So
Mm,
yeah, that is transdisciplinarity in the flesh. And for me personally, transdisciplinarity is one of the best ways to actually honor the full spectrum of being human. Body, soul, psyche, imagination. It's where everything meets everything else.
mm,
And where, the inner life and the collective life become inseparable. And I think this is, again, what Hillman does when he works in that space.
mm. Okay. Rula, just a question out on the side there somewhere is, if you had to go to a desert island and you could only take two books with you, what would you take and why?
I would take the Red Book
Oh yeah.
and The Spirit of Man in Art and Literature. Yeah, those are the two books by Jung that I would take with me.
Well, let's just take up, because probably we are getting near the time, but let's take up the spirit of art and in literature.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
what is it about that essay or that book that you like?
a lot of things. And mainly, it's not just the content per se, not the content in terms of the thematic content,
Hmm.
but it's the way Jung brings the content out. For example, his essay on Ulysses. Um, there are so many different voices. The trickster in Jung is so strong in that essay that it makes me laugh at the end. Um, it's brilliant because it starts off with a very harsh criticism, almost an insult of James Joyce's Ulysses. It's very reactionary at the beginning, and it kind of we can all relate to that because let's face it, I mean, Ulysses is not an easy read.
Hmm.
It's not anybody's piece of cake, at least not love at first sight. Let's put it
Hmm.
that way.
Hmm.
And the way Jung carries out our own voices when he speaks about it in the beginning, it's funny.
Hmm.
And then he starts to peel it down layer by layer by layer, not by analyzing anything in the novel itself, but simply by analyzing or speaking about the way he feels towards it. And he comes round in the end. So in the end, he ends on the note of appreciation after comparing the whole process of reading it to a tapeworm experience. And in the end, it's a huge appreciation. So it changed. First of all, it helped me process my own feelings towards complicated pieces of literature, and mainly it was because I had to write my PhD on it as well.
Ah.
And that was a nightmare.
Mm.
To be honest, that was a nightmare for
Mm.
me. And then when I saw that Jung had similar
Had
problems
had a
with the
similar
same text,
nightmare.
yeah, made me feel a lot better.
Mm.
Um, and again, towards the end of the essay, when he reached the point of appreciating it, it gave me a little bit of hope. And not just that, but I just found it brilliant. And in so many other essays in the book, he uses the same method. So it's a very performative, it's a very creative style of writing. Um, it's unlike many of his other lectures, it's unlike many of his other essays, and it has a very creative, almost mischievous tone to it, and I love that.
Yeah, that's
And I
good.
see something different every time
In
I
that,
read that book or every time I pick out an essay randomly from it. Yeah, it's just marvelous.
while you were talking, I was thinking it's kind of alchemical too, because it starts with the Nigrita,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
he's going
Yeah.
through the kind of to the libido maybe towards the end. So
Yeah,
this idea that the light comes out of the darkness seems like, because in the rational enlightenment, or there's this idea of a certain kind of figure of light or whatever. But I think with alchemy, there's this thing of that through working sometimes with the darkness, one heads towards the light,
of
um,
course.
is a slightly different kind of idea.
Yeah, and he also I forgot where that appeared in, but when he spoke about the katabasis, the Nikia, the descent into hell and back, yeah, that is exactly the alchemy of Jungian depth psychology and of life in general and of encounters, whether it is with art, with each other, with personal experiences. So working with that darkness, which is actually the unconscious material, the shadow and all what it has with it in our unconscious, that's the main fertile zone of the psyche.
And when you think
And I think
about,
it was Monica Wickman who called it the pregnant darkness,
right, oh, that's
the
good.
idea of the pregnant darkness. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you just maybe when you think about the pantheon, the Greek pantheon, let's say,
Mhm.
if there's different archetypal images, you seem to like this one of the trickster or the mercurial. Uh, what I get from that is the playfulness.
The playfulness of the gods,
Yeah.
and also the invitation to become playful as well, which I find it as an invitation to be more creative and to take the world through the creative lens, to make
Mm,
something of it as it makes something of you. So being a co-creator is one facet of who we are that again we need to get more in touch with. We need to believe and we need to trust.
mm,
And yeah, that would be my message from the gods in the pantheon.
mm. Is it, are there other, uh, you know, Hestia or Athena, or are there others, Dionysus, that would, I mean, what I'm trying to say is, could you add in another one of the gods or goddesses that you think are important in the creative process?
Aphrodite.
Why?
Aphrodite, of course, because of this bridge between Psyche and Eros and Logos. Um, the embodiment of love is the embodiment of bridging everything. It's also, it's not just a representation of what's happening in life, but it is also very deep, as in very unconscious.
Mm,
Bringing out this unconscious material, working on it through love, through union, through the connectivity of Eros. For me, this is what makes me tick right
mm.
now. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's good. It's a style,
we need to
that,
we need to bring her in
yeah,
so many.
absolutely.
So Yeah.
It's like if rationality was that much of the equation, there's other things that need to be brought in, and it seems to me,
Uh-huh.
I get from what you're saying is what I like about playfulness is it lets me make mistakes or experiment and not take it too like this,
Seriously.
yeah, too seriously. There's this co-creation, and then with Aphrodite is there's this thing of uh, the beauty that attracts. The style that leads one in, which sometimes we've sacrificed because we were part of
Uh-huh.
the rational enlightenment or whatever, but to allow them.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and that's also one very important reason why we need to bring Aphrodite in. We need beauty, we need love. We cannot possibly marginalize that and call it a sane world that we live in. We cannot, for the sake of fusing right and left brain hemispheres, exclude Aphrodite, who is the embodiment of the right, the right hemisphere and what it brings with creativity, beauty, love, connection. Yeah, so the space of logos, for example, the space of the academic, the scholarly, the hard sciences, it needs a bit more balancing out. And then again, Aphrodite is the agent that does that.
Yeah, yeah, that's good.
So, and yeah.
I mean, maybe that's a good place to finish. It's a nice place to finish. And I just would like to ask you one small thing before we go, perhaps, Rula, is
Hmm.
what, how do you see, what you're doing over the next few years? Where would you like to head with arts-based research?
Well, what I really want to do is keep doing what we're doing, keep seeing what other people are doing, keep encouraging it. And mainly, it's because we want to integrate the arts and creativity in general as not just a lifestyle, but as a solution. So, transdisciplinarity, arts-based research, the whole psychology and practice of Eros communication, integration, union, this needs to work its way into the world. And not just in the marginalized space or the prestigious space of art, art for entertainment, art for leisure. It needs to be a way of life.
Yeah.
If we all thought creatively, if we all behaved creatively and allowed this creative space in our lives, then yes, I think we would actually not just be making things easier or more peaceful, but we will actually be creating the new world. And it is up to us. It is up to everybody because everybody's an artist in their own way. But the artists are the ones that are going to be creating the future.
Mm,
And I hope that means everybody realizes the artist within them. I like there's a saying by Picasso. I think it goes something like the artist is the child that survives.
mm,
And again, there's a lot of Jungian tone to it here, especially when we focus on the aspect of play and
mm,
of connection. Um, so yes, it does mean in a way going back to this childhood, childlike state of mind where you want to connect, you want to play,
mm.
and yeah, for you, the world is something that you create.
And you know what
So we, yeah.
I,
Mm.
I think you used the term earlier, co-creator, that if art
Yes.
can sometimes seem a little elite for some, but co-creation, to be a co-creator is a beautiful term, if you ask me, that it's this role of
Yes.
working with the universe and contributing that.
It's not only a role, it's also a responsibility. This is something, as we said earlier, like it's perhaps the only way that you could honor the full spectrum of being a human, where you bring body, soul, and psyche into play. and of course through the imagination. So there's a huge responsibility
Yeah,
over here.
that's good. Thank
Art
you.
could be subversive, it could be disruptive, but it's also very healing. It's also very connecting. And again, art is the process of making, of bringing something into being. And we all want a better world.
Making. Thank you very much. That's been a very lovely
Thank you.
discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Really enjoyed it.